like the hot summer and everything was happening and everything was just, there was just unrest, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't think of a more fitting way to kind of think about the conversation that I get the privilege to have with Yvette and Bianca, as you guys are both spending so much time invested in, quite frankly, the future for others, not only yourself, the future for others, as you represent and participate in the writers, actors strike and movement that's happening right now boldly. I'd say the epicenter being in LA, but my understanding is that anyone in and around the space is participating in very unique and distinct ways. So let's talk about it.
Let's
First,
talk about it.
yes, let's talk about it. So I think
Hot strike summer is what they're calling it.
hot strike summer.
They're calling it hot strike summer.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh my God.
There's shirts, there's pins. Everybody's like hot strike summer.
Okay, I'm gonna need to get one of those. One of y'all gonna have to send me a pin, because that's monumental. So why now? I guess the big question, the burning question following the theme of hot, is why now is everyone at the point of exhaustion and fed up and ready for movement and ready for and seeking action? I'd like to hear from both of you. So maybe I'll start, first with you, Yvette, and then we'll hear from you, Bianca.
We tend to approach this. we have a lot of similar thought around this, but we've reached a boiling point. And you cannot, like, it's bubbling over, and there is no more what if AI, because AI is here. There is no more what do I do if I cannot keep up with the fast, growing economy, like with the cost of living, because we're here. What if my livelihood is at stake? What if the longevity of this particular profession is at stake because they've squeezed it so much and stretched it so much that the creatives are the pieces that are getting lost in between? And when we drive this industry, never was it meant for us to lose so much equity in it that we are unable to exist at all. It's like our very livelihood. We might as well, like, okay, what should we do? Pack it up and go to medical school? Really, seriously, what is the alternative when this is what we do for a living? They're literally squeezing us out when we are the very existence of the creative space.
Wow. What do you think, Bianca?
I think it was inevitable. We're at a space where for decades this has been happening, right? Or year after year, all over the country, not just us. I think people are getting to the point where they're fed up, right? The how much the difference between the uber wealthy and we don't have a middle class, right? Like lower class has expanded and expanded, horrifically since at least the 80s, right? And what the pay is for some people and the pay is for other people, and the cost of living going up and everything. So I think there's some of that, but then there's this other like more immediate thing that I think, it's funny, a friend said basically like every, 19, whenever you get to the 20s of whatever century, things go crazy. And I was like, oh, we bought the deal. Because we have all of it, right? We've got, recessions, we've got, things crashing, we've got robber barons, we've got, economic issues, war, we've got social unrest, you have, for us, it's like between
total disruption, Bianca.
Of all things, right? It's like we were barely recovering from the last, bust. Then, COVID happens. and everything shuts down, which to me gave people time to really think, right, about how unhappy they are and about how much they're being abused and about how much stuff was wrong, because we watched the system literally turn against everyone who wasn't uber wealthy, right? Like, we were supposed to have these PPP loans that were going to everybody, but the people who got them mostly were like ultra wealthy, and then people scamming. So there's that. Then you have all these companies getting money, and then what do? They don't keep their workers like they're supposed to. They buy back their stocks, right? Like, you have all of these things where everybody is having record breaking profits, and I'm doing air quotes, and yet the workers have no money, right? So you have that in COVID, plus you have millions of people dying, plus you have like the heels of war, right? All of these things are happening. And then for us in our industry, I'm surprised it hadn't happened sooner, right? Because we've had so many fights in the last couple of years. And I think if COVID hadn't happened when it did, 2020 would have been the year that like a lot of these issues would have been brought up. But because of COVID, we didn't get anything in 2020. We were all just like, okay, we can't deal with it. And so on this side of it, after 3 years, after record profits, after we, work ourselves to death. I mean, I didn't get to see my mama for 2.5 years because I was working. And my mother doesn't live that far. But it was like everybody was working themselves to the bone, and people were saying how important entertainment business was to people's survival. And yet when we get to the other side, it's basically, that's nice, we're not going to pay you. Everything you want, we're not going to pay you. We're going to ask you to do more and more and more with less and less and less. And I think for a lot of writers, and particularly also actors, because I'm in both unions, it was just like, enough is enough, right? Like, streaming killed our industry in regards to residuals. It was just like inevitable to happen. It's like all the things happening at once, and then at a certain point, the pressure builds and the volcano explodes. But the same thing is happening with the UPS people, although I think they made a deal. And then hotel workers, like, there's so many different kinds of people.
So here's what I'm going to say, though, and I'm curious to hear what you think. The difference between the UPS worker and the corporate worker at, any job, ... is that us folks that are not intimately familiar with the space, what we see is what we get. But the piece that I'm disconnected from as it relates to the acting industry in particular, the entertainment industry in particular, is that it's only through this experience that I'm starting to learn all of the fanfare, all of the documentation, all of the writing, all of that. There's a little bit of shade, if I can use that word, that has kind of been put out there, because I hear what you're saying. Yes, there are fights to fight across the board, multi-industry. That is a fact. However, I'm going to say until a group came together and said, it's time, most of us had no idea the economic structure of that industry. And full disclosure, I paid for a child to get in that industry, right? So
exactly. And as a rule of thumb, like, people just think you're rich. Oh my God, you write for television. Oh my God, you write movies. Oh my God, you write for Netflix. Like, you must be rich. You must be making a ton of money. When the truth is over time, our pay has eroded, and it's not kept up with the changes of the industry. So we have been getting paid off an antiquated system. And I remember the day, because Bianca is extremely modest, but she's also a strike captain, and she is co-chair of the CBW, which is the Committee of Black Writers. And I just consider myself a wonderful sounding board, because, I listen to it all and I hear it all and I go, I hear you, and this, right? So I remember the day that she said to me, this isn't going to be a short fight, and it's not going to be an easy fight. And I said, why is that? And she said, because the entire structure of how we get paid has to change. And I think that was when it hit me. And that was last year.
Wow.
And we've been preparing for this. And I think for me, it was comforting to know it wasn't just me, because you can live in a bubble, right? And so you have friends and we're all developing, and we know that development typically doesn't pay. And so we know that, like, in between developing and praying that this show gets pitched and gets picked up, that we're also doing gig work. And then we're also like writing on a show. And so you're like barely sleeping because you're also trying to do development. And then you're trying to get, you know, your show done, but also feeling like something isn't right here. Like, I shouldn't be working this hard and getting paid like this little. And then wondering whether or not I'm going to work for 3 more months when that job is over. And I think what happened this strike, as opposed to 2007's strike, was the internet and more people being able to voice it.